Hi, I'm Hayden Nelson. And so if you're coming to this video, it's likely that you've chosen to use some open source software tools and you're looking to get started with the USRP Hardware Driver, which is the software driver that is typically used in the open source flow toolchain for the universal software radio peripheral. And so in this video, we're going to just go over a couple topics. Let's get over here on this screen. And so we're going to cover these 5 topics, starting with the USRP hardware driver, some installation options, the driver file structure, where to find some resources, and ultimately I want to get to where I give you a demonstration of how to install the USRP hardware driver, or UHD, from the repository on GitHub and build it from source and then install it. We'll do a couple steps of getting some FPGA images loaded, validate the install. We're able to communicate with our device. I have a B200 here at my desk, and then we'll just do a simple ASCII text demonstration. So let's get started. So from a previous video, you may have seen this, and this is kind of the software stack up of the USRP. And we're starting with the application layer. We'll do a very simple application today on top of the C++ API for the USRP hardware driver. And as I mentioned previously, these different APIs work in, have different support for different operating systems. So since we have taken the turn and said, hey, we're going to work with open source tools, we're going to work with Linux today. And so the USRP hardware driver, we have a driver in Windows, OS X, and Linux, and some embedded Linux for our embedded class devices. And so we'll talk about, there's really 2 methods to get UHD running on your Linux system. The way that I recommend is really just to pull it from the repository from GitHub and build it from source. And I'll walk through this process today in this video. The other is doing it from binary packages. And while you can do this, it has some limitations on the different Ubuntu versions. This may have been updated by the time you watch this video from when I record it, but these are some of the limitations. I won't go through this today, but if you go to this web address here you see on the screen, you can follow some of that the procedure and install the UHD USRP hardware driver from binary packages. I won't be doing that today in this video. We will be doing it from source and building it right out of the repository, which is way more fun and something I highly recommend for any open source developer to just get familiar with that process. And so when we do clone the repository from GitHub, you'll notice that there's 6 folders that we'll be putting onto our system here locally. And the first one is the host, and this is where the host source, the source code for the host side driver is placed. And we're going to be doing most of our work within this directory today. There are some other directories where the firmware, we do have some microcontrollers on the USRP hardware, and the firmware for those microcontrollers is housed here. Most people don't need to modify this. The FPGA source. Now, since today we're not going to be having to make any kind of modifications to the FPGA source, we're not going to be cloning that portion of the repository, so we are not going to use a -- recursive call. But if you were going to work with the FPGA source, you would want to do a recursive call to get these pieces of the repository. And we're just not going to do it today because it's not necessary, and it takes up the subdirectory can be very large, and we just don't need that today for what we're going to do. The module peripheral manager is the NPM, and so some of our USRP devices have embedded Zincs in them, and so our embedded USRPs that has code in it for those embedded Zincs. And then the default FPGA images, and so we'll be working with this folder directly because we'll actually need to get the right FPGA image for our B200. You'll see as we move along within the video. And then there's some tools and utilities in the tools directory for debugging purposes, and we'll use some of those today as well. So I'm not going to go into the depths of GitHub. GitHub, there's Git, and GitHub. Those are kind of 2 different things. Git is a repository, tool predominantly on Linux and other. I use Git and GitHub on Windows-based machines as well, so it's not limited to those operating systems. But it's beyond the scope of this video to dive into the depths of GitHub. Here's some links just to, if you are interested to learning more about GitHub. All of the open source software tools for the USRP Hardware Driver, as well as GNU Radio, which we'll do in the next video, are hosted on GitHub. And so github.com/Ettus Research. And so without going into the depths of what Git and GitHub are, ultimately we will be working within the command line interface today, and we'll be using some of these 5 basic commands here today. I think I'm only really going to use 3 of these because I'm not going to look at the log and the status. So, but I will be doing a git clone where we'll clone the repository that basically goes out to GitHub and just makes a local copy of the repository on my hard drive. And then we'll look at some of the versioning and we'll check out a specific version. There's a lot more to GitHub in terms of doing pull requests and pushing back to the community. And if you are very interested in open source communities, it's something that we're always considering having people work on the code base as well, because that's kind of the spirit of open source, if you will. So with that, we'll hop out of the slides here and we'll get right into a couple things. So let's start here with Ettus.com. This is, oh, look, it says I'm in Puerto Rico because I haven't set my, so you can tell this is real. So what I have here today is actually, I just imaged this machine. So I have a fresh install of the latest Linux Ubuntu distribution installed. And the only things I've installed on here is a PDF viewer. Well, actually, that came pre-installed. I had to install a piece of software to do screen recording, and that's pretty much it. So I just wanted to do that so I can show you going through the motions here from scratch. So with that said, you can kind of get an idea. We're in the summer of 2019. GNU Radio Conference is coming up if anyone's going to that. So a couple of things here on the website that I want to call your attention to. There's the different products here. So let's just look at the bus series products to start. And you can kind of go through here. You can see on the Ettus webpage, we do offer several of these USRPs as board-only versions. And so that's quite a bit different than on ni.com. ni.com offers them with board-only. Well, the boards are pre-installed in enclosures, and so we only sell the enclosure versions. At least at the time of this video, that may have changed in the future. So I actually have a USRP B200 here. It actually doesn't look like this because I have one in a nice enclosure. But the functionality is the same, and you can come in here and you can see what this particular software-defined radio is. It's 70 to 6 gigahertz. It is USB 3. You can kind of come through here and read through some of this. We won't do that right now. And there's some nice things in here, and you can see that we do have a single receive and then a transmit and receive port on the USRP. And so it does have an 809364 RFIC, and it has a Spartan FPGA built on it with a USB 3 controller. So that's kind of the radio we'll be working with today. And then if you come down here a little bit further in the additional resources, there's a number of really useful pieces of information for you if you are considering this particular radio. So that's what we're working with today. And then there's some information here on the different software packages that are available. And we talked about these a little bit in my previous video, just talking about different software choices. We're working through the open source tool chain. So we're going to look at the USRP hardware driver. And this is just some basic blurb on what UHD is. And one of the examples that we have is this ASCII art spectrum analyzer, and this is kind of where we're going to end up at the end of this video, is being able to look at a spectrum in ASCII art. But I'm going to call your attention to the knowledge base, and this is a very useful set of information, and it has a number of links in here in terms of getting started guide, hardware resources, software resources, user manuals, information specific to certain products. So let's look at the B200 series, which I'll be working with today, and it has some information about like technical support and a knowledge base, and there's a lot of good resources on here for you as a customer of our software-defined radios. If you go down here to application notes, there's a lot of information here on various different application notes from different applications and products we have. But today we're going to look at AN445. And so let's start with this, written by our famous Neil Pandya here at National Instruments and Ettus Research. And so this is the one I want to start with today. And essentially this is building and installing the USRP open source toolchain, UHD, and GNU Radio on Linux. Today we're just going to look at the UHD piece of this. So let's come down here and we can kind of see that there's a number of things, some information to get Linux installed, and there's several different distributions of Linux. Today we're working with the latest version of Ubuntu, and it gets right into it. And so let's go ahead and get to it. We're gonna move this off to the side here, and actually I have a terminal already opened up here, and so let me move this over and shrink this down and move this back here. And so the first thing we need to do is just make sure I have everything kind of up to date here. So I'm going to run this as the super user do. And so we need to run this step here. And now we're working with Ubuntu, so we're only going to run the steps here. And so I'm just going to kind of walk through this bit of a tutorial, if you will, to get USRP Hardware Driver running. So there's quite a number of installation dependencies that you'll need to set up here. Some of them are like Doxygen, CMake, Git. We just want to make sure you have all these tools just to get through this tutorial. Some of them are required and some of them are kind of optional, but I'm just going to go ahead and install all of these dependencies here. So I hit Control-C and center mouse click, and it's a lot of text, and so this may take a few minutes to run, but this is a good first step just to make sure you have the most up-to-date dependencies, and we're working with the latest Ubuntu distribution here. So I'm going to kind of scroll through this. We have the different dependencies for different versions of Ubuntu and Fedora, and so as you can see here, we'll get down here to building and installing UHD from source code. And so this is where we're going to pick up here with starting here to clone the repository and move forward with that. I'm going to go ahead and pause the video because this may take a few minutes to unpack and install these dependencies, and it's not worth you sitting here watching this text scrolling, so I will restart the video once this installation is complete. Alright, so that is complete. All the dependencies are installed, so we are going to make sure we're in our home directory here. Let me go ahead and clear the screen too. So I'll clear the screen, start from a fresh canvas here, and you can see we're in our nice home directory. So I'm going to go ahead and make a directory, mkdir, good old-fashioned work area -UHD. Did I spell that right? So let's go ahead and get in there. And so we're in I created just a work area for us to work within. So over here on our little tutorial app note, if you will, we'll go ahead and copy paste this. And so before we do that, let's take a quick venture over here to GitHub. And so we can maximize this here, and you can see that on GitHub we're in the master branch on the Ettus Research UHD section, and we have those 6 directory structures I was talking about: the tools, npm, images, host, FPGA source, and firmware. And so this is the repository, and you can kind of look through the different versions that are released here. Looks like Martin Brown was checked in something 6 days ago. So anyway, but we're not going to get into the depths of the repository today. We're just going to clone it. So we're going to copy this command, git clone. So boom, git clone, and then boom, it's going to clone the repository. This shouldn't take us that long, but essentially, there you go. It's already done because we didn't do that -- recursive. Remember. And so we can go into the directory here. We can see, hey, we got all 6 of our folders here. And so let's do git tag -l. And so this pulls up all the different version tags. And so what we're going to do today is we'll scroll down here. You can kind of see that we're going to need to check out a specific version of UHD. So we're going to say git checkout V. And now the text has to be perfectly accurate here. So there's 4 numbers here, kind of the main version, the secondary, a minor release, and a patch. So let's do version 3.14. Let's go with 0.1. That seems to be the latest, fully released version. So let's go with the latest one. Git checkout version 3.141.0, and then boom, we are now have the UHD of that version checked out. So let's go ahead and change to so we can go in here and look and see, okay, we still got our 6 directories. Change to the host directory. Let's make a directory called build, if I can type, and we're going to change into that directory. So what we need to do from here is we need to make all our make files. So cmake .. And this will essentially, I won't go through all the details of what cmake does, but it essentially is making the make files. And at this point, we are ready to build. So we've cloned the repository, checked out a version, made all our make files, and let's just go ahead and type make. And now we're off and building here. And so this is going to take a little while. So again, I'm going to pause the video and we'll return whenever this compilation is complete. And so you can kind of see the next things we're going to do is we're going to test our installation, we're going to test our build, we're going to do an install, and move on with just kind of doing some post-installation steps here to make sure our USRP works on our system. And so this will take, a certain amount of time depending on how powerful of a computer you got. I'm running some screen capture software, so it's probably going to slow me down a little bit more. So anyway, we'll pause here. Be right back. All right, so the compilation has completed. You'll notice there's a little bit of a kind of chatter in your compilation window. There's some warnings here and there. It's nothing to be concerned about as long as you don't have an error in the compilation process. And you can see here that we have completed the compilation process successfully. So let's go ahead and let me clear the clear the canvas here one more time. So we just did a make, and so let's go ahead and run a make test here. The next step. Let's just kind of make sure, does some checks to make sure that our installation went well. And now the next major step that we need to do here is sudo make install. So make sure you're doing this as the super user, and this will go ahead and install USRP onto your computer. And so we'll go ahead and run this particular line here. I'll just copy paste this. And we need to, based on your Ubuntu installation, you'll need to install make sure one of these particular lines to a path is in your .bash rc file. So we go ahead and clear the canvas here one more time. Go back to our home directory. Nano .bash rc. And I've actually already placed this line in here, but you can see that we have this export library, LD library path. And there's a couple of instructions here if this is already in here and you need to add it. If there's already this environmental variable created, you'll have to append this, if you will. So that's already there, so we should be good to go. We'll need to close this and ultimately reopen it. So let's go ahead and get it back large here. So that'll resource our bash rc file. And at this point, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to unhook my mouse here, and I'm going to hook up my USRP B200. And so at this point, I've actually already done one of these steps here. I got a little bit ahead of myself. But the next step that we'll need to do is run this UHD images downloader. So go sudo UHD. So it should start finding these utilities now. I'm using tab complete here, so I can do UHD find devices. That's another one. Let's do the UHD images downloader. And so we're going to run this, and this may take a few minutes the first time you run it. And if you look over here on the tutorial, it'll look something like this. And where it'll actually go and download the latest FPGA image for your USRP off of our repository, and so it's quite a nice utility. So you'll need to do that because if you don't and you run this UHD find devices, you know, so now that I have my USRP plugged in, it actually recognizes, whereas in the past it would like not find it and it wouldn't find the FPGA image, and so it would kind of error out. And ultimately it'll prompt you to run this utility. There is another utility that's actually pretty useful here. So UHD USRP probe. And this'll go ahead and you know, pull up some information regarding the serial number and frequency configuration, etc. for your USRP. And so I will type a couple commands here that I've actually already installed on this particular system, but I'm going to do them here just to illustrate, is that we actually, you know, because we are using a B series, and so this is specific to the product that I'm using, not to UHD, but I'll do it here for completion, just, you know, to make this complete, because there's another step here that you need to be aware of. And for the B series, you need to add some UDEV rules for USB devices, so it can recognize it as a USB device. So first we need to go, you know, back to our work area. Let's go to UHD host utils, and underneath here you'll you know, there's a UHD USRP.rules file. And so what we need to do is we need to copy that UHD dash USRP.rules file to etc /udev rules.d. And so I should have done that as a sudo. And by doing that as a sudo, it'll allow me to do that because the etc directory is protected. So now we need to do sudo udf adm control-reload, if I can type, dash rules dash, excuse me, sudo udev admin trigger. And so those steps right there will allow you to, if this UHD find devices doesn't work for you, then you need to run those particular steps that I just outlined, you know, along the way here. So with that, we have installed our USRP. It is absolutely up and working, you know, working well. And so what we want to do next is go ahead and let's go back to our host directory, and so underneath here we have this you know, examples directory, and you'll see that there's a number of CPP files underneath here, and so we're actually going to go and look at this ASCII art DFT file. So let's go back to our build directory and go into the actual built examples of these, and so from here we can see that the ASCII, you know, dot slash ASCII, see, where is it? Is it in here? Yeah, dot slash excuse me, dot slash rx ASCII art.dft. Let's go ahead and run that, and you can see that it has a let me clear that, and so we can see it here. So you can see it has a number of parameters that we'd have to, you know, set in order to run this. So for this example, we don't need our tutorial anymore. So let's go ahead and make this full screen. So we're going to do dot slash rx, you know, ASCII text. And as we can see in some of the parameters here, we need to set things like dash frequency, the center frequency. I actually have a FRS radio here, and I have it set to channel 18, which I just happen to know is 462.625 E3, you know, 462.625 megahertz. We're going to go ahead and set our rate to 1 E6. That's setting our sample rate. We're going to set our gain to 20. We're going to set our reference dash LVL to -50. And so we'll go ahead and run that. And you'll notice it kind of looks a little bit like an ASCII text art spectrum analyzer, which is pretty nerdy, I guess. And so I got my little FRS radio here, and I'll go ahead and turn it on. And when I key the mic, you can see, oh man, I'm transmitting, quite a bit of power here. And so, take my finger off the button, press the button on. You can see there's as I move it closer over here, it's probably pretty overloading the front end there. I should probably do that. But at this point, I'm pretty confident that my USRP my B200 is running. I got version 3.14.1 installed in the USRP hardware driver. I built it from scratch right out of the depot, and I downloaded FPGA images, and I installed the driver, and I'm running some examples. And so from this point, we can probably go into the C++ driver, and if we wanted to build our own application out of that, or we can go in and look at the next video in our series, which will be based on using the USRP with GNU Radio. So we'll go in and install GNU Radio and go through all that process. So here we go. We'll go on to the next video, and hopefully this was helpful to get you up and going with UHD from building from source. Thank you.